First of all, again, to say praise the Lord to everyone. I would like to thank you all for joining us this morning for the Georgia State Council Young People and Health Professions Table Talk discussion, Q&A, talking about getting better understanding of the COVID vaccine. We are very honored this morning to be here with you. I want to give first recognition to the diocesan bishop, our illustrious bishop, Bishop J.D. Guthrie, and the First Lady of the state of Georgia, Lady Marcia Ladd Guthrie. We like thank everyone again for being here. And at this time, I am going to turn this over to our bishop, Bishop Guthrie. Bishop?
It's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Bishop.
Okay. I'd like to say good morning to everyone and praise the Lord. We're grateful to God
Praise
for
the
this
Lord.
opportunity for today. And thank you. First, I want to thank Dr. Stevens for taking time out to be with us today. Thank you, Dr. Priscilla, for making this happen. And I want to thank Dr. Carmen, who is the president of the health professionals of the Georgia State Council, in helping to make sure that this program go forward. I'm thinking, and I know our young people's president should be on, Elder Andre Faulkner. If he's not, he'll be on listening today. So this is this is a time where I want the young people to ask questions. You're going to receive some valuable information that will help us all. And the main thing it is that we all stay safe and stay in compliance with the CDC and where we are at this time. So thank you. May God bless you and may heaven smile upon you. Back into the hands of Dr. Hubbard. But before that, I'd like to just have a word of prayer and ask God's blessings upon us and upon this meeting. Father, we thank you for this day, your tender mercy and your loving kindness. We thank you for this opportunity that has been afforded unto us, that we can come and receive information that will help us all. We thank you for our facilitator, Dr. Stevens, of how you have allowed her to be a blessing to so many people. Thank you for our health professionals from the Georgia State Council, Dr. Carmen. And we ask that you will help us and give us the strength that we will go forward. Remember, even our Dr. Hubbard, and ask God that you will give her the strength to go forward, we pray. We thank you for knowing that prayer changes things, and we're looking unto you. Help us throughout this day, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Let's see. Dr. Carmen?
Yes, sir.
You want to say a few words, and we'll turn it back over to Dr. Hubbard.
Well, I would just like to say praise the Lord and thank everyone for being on board, especially our young people. And I want to thank you, Bishop, for the heart that you have for our young people for this meeting to even be planned. And then again, thank you, Dr. Stevens, for being here, who will be answering some very important questions. I just want to encourage all the young people to express your concerns, any issues that you have. This is put everything on the table and just come with an open mind and open heart, that because what we're just trying to do is to give you a better understanding about the vaccine so that you can make a better informed decision concerning. So again, thank you for being on board.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And Elder Andre, would you come please and bring greetings on behalf of the young people for Georgia State Council?
Yes, praise the Lord. Good morning, everybody. First,
Good morning.
Giving honor to God, who is the head of my life, and I thank God for this beautiful day Thank God for being able to be with you this morning on this discussion. Giving honor and praise to Bishop J.D. Guthrie, and to all of you, Dr. Priscilla, Dr. Hubbard, Dr. Carmen, Dr. Williams, Dr. Kenyetta Stevens. Also want to recognize one of my youth leaders from All Nations Christian Church, Sister Whitney Bingham, who is here with me online this morning. I'm looking forward to this discussion because a lot of questions, particularly for the young people, skepticism that may arise, even now as it relates to us getting ready to almost close out the summer for the southern states and getting ready to go back into school. So there's a lot of questions in relations to the vaccine, and I'm hoping that this presentation, this discussion will be informative.
Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate those comments. And now we're going to go into our table talk discussion. We're very honored, very pleased to have a phenomenal woman who I consider a friend, a colleague, Dr. Kenyetta Stevens. She has come before our church on different capacities before, but I thank God for this opportunity. She is taking time out of her very, very busy schedule because she has a passion to ensure that our people are well informed of what is going on, things that actually affect us in a health perspective. I want to give you a brief information about Dr. Stevens. She is a highly skilled, independent, published infectious disease epidemiologist with over several years of advanced training and professional experience in the fields as it relates to disease surveillance, bioterrorism, HIV/AIDS, outbreak work and management. She is highly skilled in the field and been heavily sought after as it relates to this COVID-19 pandemic. And we are very honored and very pleased to have her here today to give us a wealth of information and give us some possible answers to some of those questions that you have been burning and want to have a desire on. Because we know in our community, it is a vaccine hesitancy of actually going forth and taking this vaccine. And now with this Delta variant, she's going to give us some information relative to that as well. So please, if you have questions, please feel free to relinquish your videos, ask those particular questions, and don't be afraid to ask those questions if you feel that you think that is not a question that should be asked, because she is here to be able to give you those answers to those questions that you have been burning and having a desire as it relates to that vaccine. So as no further ado, I'd like to formally introduce to some and reintroduce to others, Dr. Kenyetta Stevens.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Hubbard. It's always an honor and a pleasure to share a platform with you and to come before this assembly, and to Bishop and Lady Guthrie. It's always an honor to be able to serve you in this capacity. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Hubbard, again for that introduction. Just to say, I'm also a adjunct professor of public health and global health, just to give you guys a little bit more. So my presentations are always informal because I like to speak with young people, young adults on their level. And that has been one of the reasons why I've been asked to speak throughout the state of Georgia. I'm considered a COVID-19 subject matter expert for that very reason. And I've actually had the opportunity to speak from North Georgia to South Georgia, and actually some global opportunities as well to speak to you about COVID and vaccine hesitancy. So I am on social media. I know what's out there. I know what I get DMs all the time with videos showing me that there are nanochips and nanobots and just all kind of things in this vaccine. And I have a background in molecular biology and molecular genetics. So before I started my career in public health as an epidemiologist, I actually worked in the lab for 7 years at Emory University School of Medicine, doing breast and cervical cancer research. So I have an understanding of vaccines and infections down to the molecular level. So I can assure you that there are no nanobots, there are no trackers, no chips. And so I just want to start the conversation with that, because of all the questions that I get from young people and even some older people that are holding out about this vaccine is, are there microchips in there? And they send me the videos where there's like this little nanobot or something that they put in the bloodstream, they said, that came from the vaccine, and that magnets will stick to you if you're vaccinated and all that. So if anyone have some questions around nanochips, nanobots in the vaccine, let's talk about that. What are your questions? Don't be shy. And don't be like looking for me on social media trying to DM me your questions either, because you don't want to be shy on here.
Well, one of the things, Dr. Kenyetta, that I've heard in regards to the vaccine is this mass sterilization and the population of the earth. And so there are a lot of concerns, especially within my family, especially among a lot of my coworkers, a lot of people I know in New York and here in Atlanta. And one of the concerns is that, first of all, they mentioned that it's not approved by the Drug Administration. I know that it was authorized for immediate use, but one of the concerns was why isn't it approved by the FDA? That's one of the concerns that we had. And then also, how will it affect further as far as sterilization for future babies, unborn babies that might be born, as far as women that will be having children in the future, side effects and those kind of things. Those are the things I've been hearing amongst my peers.
Okay, thanks, Andre. So I've heard those things too. The mass sterilization. It's funny that, especially here in the U.S., the Americans think that for some reason we're the only ones that are going through a pandemic. This pandemic is global. Everybody, it's not just the US, it's Europe, it's Africa, it's Asia, it's everywhere. So if these vaccines were created for like mass sterilization, then there would be no one left, because everybody's getting vaccinated around the world. So, I mean, they can't pick and choose who they're going to vaccinate or not. And that's like one of the main misconceptions. I will say that a lot of people think that these vaccines were only created in the US and that it's for, sterilization or elimination of a certain people. And that's not true, because for that, the president at the time, all of the world leaders got together and they put money into creating, helping companies come together to create a vaccine. So the reason why vaccines typically take long to create is because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of research. So when this global pandemic hit, all of the researchers, all the countries came together and said, hey, we're going to pool our resources and we're going to put it into these specific companies to come up with the vaccine, because we need to get ahead of this pandemic. So that's one of the first things that I want to just put out there. When we talk about FDA approval, so I actually sat on the calls for Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, which are the 3 vaccines that are currently approved for use in the US. There are about 73 COVID vaccines that are in some stage of research and development right now. So, but there are only 3 that have received FDA authorization. And I also encourage young people, young adults who have an interest in this, you can actually sit on the community advisory panel for the FDA. They have applications online. So if you're interested in that. So when they do have these companies coming forward with trying to get drugs on the market, you can actually have a voice and speak from your perspective, from your age group, to the CEOs and to these researchers in these companies. And that's one of the things too, as I go to different communities and I speak to young people and I tell them, you have a voice. Don't just sit around and wait for social media or the internet or YouTube or Facebook University or whatever it is you're getting your information from to give you this information. You actually can have a voice and you can actually sit on these panels and get that firsthand information. So that's why I chose, as a professor, I'm a member of different organizations, so I have the opportunity, but I always want to share, especially in communities of color, that you don't just have to sit and wait for the information to be given to you. You can actually be a part of these panels. And that's one way to get our voices heard and to actually start making a difference in our community. So I'll get off that soapbox and I will transition to the whole FDA approval thing. And so I get that question a lot, Andre, why isn't it approved? So there are steps to drug approvals. There are different phases. And so, but because we were in, we're still in this pandemic, what had to happen was they had to get something that could help. So when they voted on these vaccines, the question that they asked the panel of doctors and researchers and scientists, the president of Meharry School of Medicine is a part of that board. So he was there and he could speak out. And he was there representing, you know, the Black and brown community. So don't think that it was just, you know, all of these non-persons of color that sat on the board and say, hey, we're just going to give this to the Black and brown communities. And that wasn't the case at all. I was there and there are several other persons of color represented. So emergency use authorization, EUA authorization, was given to these vaccines just based on the clinical trials that they had. So it was about maybe 30 to 40,000 people that participated in the clinical trials. They had the data, and just based on that data, they were able to get these vaccines on the market because the benefits outweighed the risk for what was happening during that time. And so Pfizer and Moderna both have submitted applications because now that more people have been vaccinated and they have more data. So you have millions of people. So now they have more data, and that would have normally taken years for them to get that level of data, like millions of participants in their trial or in their study. So now that they have that data, they can now submit their package, and which they have, we're in July. Sorry, y'all been like going. So like maybe it was May that they submitted their actual package to the FDA for full approval for these vaccines. And so the FDA is going through all of that data, and they're looking just to make sure that nothing was missed. And then probably July, so maybe end of August, September, you'll probably start hearing talk or hear an announcement that the vaccines are actually approved. So that's one thing. So if they're waiting on that, it's the actual approval is actually coming. So that's definitely something to share with friends and loved ones. And then the question about the vaccine affecting unborn babies. So that is not true. And for those who are interested in learning more about how the vaccines may affect pregnancy. So the state of Georgia, like Emory University, Morehouse School of Medicine, they do these panels. I think it's every 2 weeks where people can call in if they have specific questions, if they're pregnant or have been pregnant. Because guess what? Pregnant women actually participated in the clinical trials. And there basically was no effect to their babies or as the baby or to the development. There have been pregnant women that have been vaccinated that weren't a part of the trials. And there's like no birth defects, nothing to say that the vaccines had an effect. So that whole thing about unborn babies and side effects comes from misinformation that the mRNA vaccines or the messenger RNA vaccines actually deposit genetic material into the body, and that's not true. So it's not altering your DNA, because RNA is different from DNA, so there's no genetic components to that. And the vaccines, even though they are messenger RNA based vaccines, the vaccines were actually targeted the protein subunit of the virus. So it's not even any viral genetic components that was actually put into the vaccines. So I hope I explained it in a way that when, you know, you go back and it's like, look, there is no genetic material. It was done basically from like the protein component of the virus, and that doesn't alter our DNA. So there's no concern there. Does anyone else have any questions, or do you have any more questions, Andre? Did I cover everything? Maybe not, maybe so.
I think you did a great deal as far as covering just what has been heard as far as the sterilization, and you even touched on as far as the altering of the DNA, and that's one of the things that I was concerned about, and it raises a question as far as this virus and how this coronavirus has, I guess, it has changed now. There's a Delta variant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, now we have a vaccine for the coronavirus, the COVID-19, mm-hmm. and now this Delta variant, and you have these questions and concern about, you know, every year we're gonna have to get a booster, just like, you know, the flu. Mm-hmm. And then there are questions like, okay, everything's now related to COVID-19. What happened to the flu? You know,
okay. The flu didn't go anywhere. People just wore masks. So what this pandemic showed us is that if we take precautions like the extra hand washing and just wearing the mask, we can actually cut down other infectious disease, like the infections. And that's what we saw with the flu. Now, the flu didn't go anywhere. People were more, actually, flu vaccinations increased because people were like, I don't want to be stressed out whether or not this sniffle or sneeze or cough is the flu or COVID. So I'm going to go ahead and get this flu shot. And they're actually, over in the UK, they're actually working on a vaccine that actually contains like the flu shot and a COVID vaccination together. So every year you just get it. And that's the thing with the flu shot. So the reason why we have to get flu shots every year is because the strain of flu changes. And so the one thing, and that I will share about this COVID vaccine, is that the initial vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, were made on the alpha strain or the what we call the Wuhan strain, which is the first strain that we saw. And so then we heard about the UK variant. Then it was the South African variant and the Brazilian variant. And so, but what it did was create a stigma with people from that lives in these countries. So they stopped naming it by countries of origin. And so they started giving it a Greek letter name. And so basically the Delta strain is the Indian strain. So it's the same thing. It's not just some strain that, you know, popped up, but that's how that went. And so we all know, well, and we may not know, India, very densely populated. They didn't have the capacity to really vaccinate like the US. And so I will get on my soapbox here as a public health practitioner and global health practitioner and say that until we have vaccination equity on a global level, we'll still be fighting this pandemic, because Africa right now is only 1% vaccinated as a continent. And it's not because it has a lot to do, you know, with economics, But it also has to do that Africa does not have any vaccine manufacturing facilities on the continent. They're dependent on other countries. Africa was dependent on India for vaccines. And only the countries in Africa that actually had money to afford those vaccines could get vaccines from India. But then India was like, oh, wow, we have an outbreak. Our citizens are dying, to the degree of almost 2,000 people a day. And so I have friends and colleagues in India, and they were like, at night, you could smell them, because the only thing that you can really do to stop the spread of COVID is to burn the bodies. And so they were like having these mass burnings every night. And so India was like, hey, we need our vaccines. We can't give vaccines to anybody. So maybe 2022, we'll revisit helping Africa out. But right now, Africa is on its own. So what happened was it left Africa basically with no vaccine distribution. Those who had received like the first dose of the vaccine weren't able to get the second dose. And then those who like frontline workers, like we were able to like just really vaccinate like the healthcare professionals and frontline workers. That couldn't happen in Africa. And so what we're going to start seeing now, because the virus didn't go anywhere, it's still there. So we're going to see more and more variants. And it's not because, people aren't doing this or people aren't doing that, but that's just the nature of viruses. The more you try to kill a virus, the more it does to stay alive. So it hides. So remember when COVID first came out, it was only like, it was like in the lungs, and that's what doctors were looking for. And then it got smart and was like, and then it started hiding out in other organs. So then they were finding it in the brain and the kidneys, everywhere, because once it finds a host, which is like a human host, it wants to stay, it wants to replicate, it wants to be comfortable. And so that's why it's one of the main reasons why it's important to be vaccinated. And so just want to throw it out there. If you're vaccinated, you can still get COVID. Just like if you're vaccinated, you can still get the flu. We know how many of us were vaccinated we had to get vaccinated for measles and mumps and rubella. But guess what? A couple of years ago, I was up at Harvard University because there was an outbreak on campus of measles because, the wave about 20, 25 years ago, a whole wave of anti-vaxxers popped up. And it was people who did not look like us. I will say that. They came up with like, they started having all of these kids that were affected with autism. So they, instead of saying, okay, this is something genetic and it doesn't happen every year. So they were like, it has to be this vaccine. And that's another thing, another reason why people aren't being vaccinated, because they were like, vaccines cause autism. That's not the case either, because unfortunately, the researcher who put that paper out, who put that research out, had to come back like a year or two from all the backlash because his data could not be replicated. His research could not be replicated. And so he admitted that he forged or basically lied about his data results because he needed to keep his funding. So he had to print a retraction. But guess what? That wasn't global news because people were already on the vaccines cause autism train. And they still have that misinformation now because no one's actually going back and say, well, hey, this was the original article. This was the retraction by the actual researcher. And guys, I worked at CDC for about 14 years, and there would be protests. We would get like messages. They're going to be protesting vaccines at the gate today. Be careful coming into park, all that kind of stuff. And it's just misinformation. There were parents who had children had a child that had autism, and they were convinced that it was from vaccination, but they had two older kids that got the same vaccinations that didn't have autism. And then when this third child came, that child got it, and they were like, oh, you changed, the vaccination, you did this, instead of saying, okay, let me look at my family genetic history to see what's going on. Because 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the case. And so we have to really be careful about where we're getting our information from. I was on a panel with the Equity and Diversity, Equity and Inclusion director for Twitter last year. And I'm like, are you behind Black Twitter? Because I just want to know. But she wouldn't confirm, and she wouldn't deny it either. But just being on the panel with her, and so she said she follows me on Twitter. She follows me because she considers me to be her source of truth when it comes to COVID. And that's what I urge every young person to do. Find your source of truth. Find that person who speaks from facts. I tell people when I get invited to be on like a CNN or something like that, I tell them, I'm like, I can't read from a cue card because I'm a scientist. All of these TV doctors can't be experts in every disease. They're not. They are reading from cue cards. They have to come back and retract statements that they make. I have experience. I traveled the world fighting epidemics. That's what I do. I'm like I tell my younger people I'm like a disease detective because I have been in remote African villages. I have been chased by a lion. I've been like in villages or what is. My goal is to make sure that people are informed and that they have the resources that they need to survive as an infectious disease epidemiologist. Find your source of truth. That's all I can say. Because I have colleagues that have never worked an outbreak or epidemic who got out in the public and they were saying all this stuff. Dentists, chiropractors, everybody that had a doctor in front of their name were out talking about COVID, and some of the information was wrong. And I'll be the first to admit that. And I can understand where some of the hesitancy and the confusion comes, but you have to find that person, and you have to have your source of truth, because otherwise, every time something new pops up, it's gonna bring that anxiety and it's gonna push you further and further away from making a decision. And one thing I want to bring up before I take other questions, and y'all stop me because I'm a talker, especially when it comes about this and young people and just their health overall. Tuskegee Experiment. What do y'all know? Because that was like the first thing that I got the first time I spoke to a group of Black youth. They were like, no, Dr. K, you can't, because they gave them Black men syphilis and they not about to give me COVID, and I'm not trying to die. I was like, what? They gave them what now? So I was like, have y'all actually read it for yourself? And no, they're going by what they heard on social media or read on Facebook. And so, and because of that, as of last year, I actually put it as a part of my curriculum because I teach master's in public health students. And these are the people that are going out. They're going to be the future of public health. They're younger for the most part. And so I added as a part of my class curriculum because, yeah, I'm like, y'all need to know. The men that were a part of the Tuskegee Experiment, they already had syphilis. But what happened was the researchers lied about what they were doing. That was it. They did not give them syphilis. What they did was they withheld treatment after a cure was found. So that's the difference. But guess what? 1940s, they were poor. So even if they were told, because they were given insurance, like burial insurance, they were given like stipends. So they were basically paid. And because they were so poor, they just went along with it, and they were being studied or researched. So they withheld them information. And instead of the study lasting for like 4 weeks or 4 months, it lasted 40 years. And those men never received treatment, but they thought they were doing what was right because they actually received insurance. They had burial insurance. So they thought they were doing what was right for their families. And so I always ask, and then I actually ask my students, if the men were told that there was a treatment for syphilis, would they still have participated or continued to participate? And that's something that I want. Just think about the time and think about when it happened. Would that still be the case? And so I teach every class, the results are about split. Most of them will say yes, because in the 1940s they were poor. 1920s, 1940s, the Depression, the Great Depression. So people were doing whatever for like money, just they got food, they got the extra. So most of my students do believe that even if they knew that there was a treatment and that they could possibly roll out of the study, that they would still continue to participate just because they needed the money. And so there's that. No one was given syphilis. Nobody was misled. Basically, these men contracted syphilis, however syphilis is contracted, and they basically observed how syphilis the effect that syphilis has on the body for research purposes. And so had nothing to do with a vaccine. It had nothing to do with them actually giving them a disease. And so I just want to put that out there too, because I get that a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens, for clarifying that, because I think that's some of the hesitancy of why we as African Americans are not taking heed to getting this vaccine. My thing is the miscommunication, not getting with the appropriate experts to get their various information, because as you know, we got quite a number of colleagues that are out here talking about what they know about the COVID vaccine, and really they don't have all the necessary information as it relates to that. And my thing is coming to someone such as yourself as an epidemiologist who deals with the disease on a regular basis are the ones who you should be getting the pertinent information from, not a cardiologist or a chiropractor who does not specialize in this particular field. Of my thing is you deal with someone like such as yourself or internal medicine who deals with those inside of the body because of this COVID-19. So I'm glad you brought that out about the Tuskegee Experiment, because that is the issue. The main issue is they're trying to do us the same way the Tuskegee Experiment, which is not true. So that leads into the question I would like to ask. Can you just give us some type of basic explanation of how the vaccine works when it gets into the body?
Yes. So essentially how all vaccines work, previously, they would actually, like the flu vaccines and other vaccines, they would actually use an inactivated form of the virus. So they'll heat kill the virus and put it in the vaccine, you get the injection. And so once your immune system recognizes it, it will actually go into fighting it and getting rid of it from the body. That's just a very basic level. So I always tell, so how I explain it to like my younger babies, like the elementary school students, is like spoiled milk. So how many of you have ever mistakenly had some spoiled milk? I know I have. Okay. So when you taste that spoiled milk, everything, like every sense, all your sensory reactions go off. Like it's like the smell, the taste, everything. And you're like, okay, so if you're like me, you're traumatized, right? And so now every time I see a carton of milk, I don't care if I knew I just bought it from the grocery store 2 days ago, I'm still gonna open it up. And what's the first thing that we do? We smell it. And then we're like, I think it smells okay because we're unsure of ourselves, right? Because we've been traumatized. And so then you pour it in your cereal, or you might pour it in a cup. And then what we do, we taste just a little bit, right? Just to make sure that our taste and our smell is matching up, right? And so essentially, that's how our body does when we're fighting off diseases with vaccines. So you've introduced inactivated form of the vaccine, in the cases with mRNA, there's no virus that they introduce. They actually they actually use the fragments of the spike protein. So when you see the picture of, the illustration of the COVID-19 virus, and you see the ball and you see like the little protrusions coming out. So the little protrusions, that's the spike protein. So the spike protein is what the virus actually uses to attach to cells in the body. So that's the first, so the spike protein, or the little spikes that are coming out, that's the first introduction of the virus to the body. So that's the first contact. So that's why they took fragments of the spike protein. So as soon as the COVID-19 virus enters the body and tries to attach to cells, using the spike protein, our body, because we've been vaccinated, will immediately recognize the protein. It doesn't even need the full virus. It just needs the protein part, and it'll start building the antibodies. So like that. And so back to the spoiled milk scenario. So once we have been introduced to spoiled milk, our body, all of our senses go into effect to say, okay, I need to make sure that I do not take in this spoiled milk anymore. So there are things that I know to check for before I ingest this milk. And so that's how it is internally with our body. So once something foreign has been introduced, our bodies are like, okay, something's happening. I need to do my checks to see if this is something good or if this is something bad for the body. So if it's something bad for the body, I'm going to expel it. So, it comes out, we excrete it, whatever. So the same thing with the spoiled milk. Once we're like, okay, this smells bad, I don't think this is going to be good for my body, I'm going to dump it. But if you still mistakenly drink some spoiled milk, what happens? It comes out either at the top or at the bottom. And I'll leave it like that. So that's me. But just to make the comparisons, and that's how my little people get it. They're like, we get it now. So in a way, so yeah.
I'm glad you explained it in that way, because I know when you take the vaccine, some people get side effects from it, some people do not. From my understanding, your first one, some people you okay, but that second one almost like it's the booster, and that's when your body really accepts it. And sometimes it takes you out, sometimes it's not. But they say if it does that, it's really your body's really accepting the vaccine in that regards. And then also some people say, even though you, like you said earlier, even though you do the vaccine, they're still saying wear your mask just to protect yourself and protect yourself from others. So can you give some emphasis on that? Because some people, if I get the vaccine, I'm not going to get the COVID. Can you just help them to understand that it's just like the flu, like you said earlier, you get the flu vaccine, but you can still get it. But from my understanding, correct me too, your symptoms won't be as severe. Is that correct?
That is correct. So for those of you who were down at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium for Kanye's listening party last Thursday, with no mask on, 9 times out of 10, y'all were exposed to COVID, and you need to be tested. And the reason why I say that is, if you're vaccinated, you can still be asymptomatic. So we remember when all that controversy came out last year about the asymptomatic carriers or whatever. So essentially you can have the virus, but the viral load count may be so low that you don't actually have any of the symptoms. But guess what? You can still pass it to other people. And so that's where my clarion call and cry is for people. Still get tested. We know you couldn't drive down the street without seeing a testing center. Now you can throw a rock and not even hit any. And that's because of the misinformation that if you're vaccinated, you no longer have to be tested for COVID. And that's not true, because the vaccines do their job where the symptoms, you may be asymptomatic, or you might think it's allergies, or you might think it's a cold, because you're like, well, I'm vaccinated, I know it's not COVID. Well, guess what? It can be COVID. So that's why it's important to be tested, because you can actually give it to other people. And I actually have a colleague that is kind of facing that right now. He thought he had food poisoning, y'all. So wow. COVID, like the upsets, all that, and he hung out with his friends. They went on a camping trip. So I will say, just disclaimer, wasn't a person of color. So it was about 50 of them went camping last weekend. Nobody had on masks. Like, they were all just like threw caution to the wind. And then they started Tuesday feeling sick. They go so one of them was like, well, let me just get tested for COVID because I can't taste and I can't smell. So guess what, y'all? He was positive, vaccinated, positive.
Wow.
But like, no severe symptoms where he had to go to the hospital, which means like, okay, the vaccine actually did its job, but you still have mild symptoms. So that's why you still, even if you're vaccinated, if you think it's a cold, or if you think it's a flu, just get a test, a COVID test, just to be on the safe side. Because, and I know also you guys are hearing that now this is the unvaccinated pandemic, which is partly true. But for those of you who are unvaccinated and y'all are still hanging out and partying with your vaccinated friends because y'all think y'all safe because they vaccinated even though you're not, guess what? They can still give you COVID. They can transmit COVID to you.
Wow. That's some good information, Dr. Stevens, because some people feel like they're immune. I'm just like, Superman. No, you're not. It's almost like, even though he might be Superman, when you put the kryptonite in front of him, he gets weak. And that's the way you would say, explain it to our young people. They don't understand, especially those getting ready to go back to school. They need to understand you still wear your mask, you still wash your hands, still keep your hand sanitizer on, because it's very, very important until we can get our arms wrapped around this pandemic. And we have one of our guests that are on, Adrian Martin. Would you mind releasing your camera and your mic and ask your question that you have placed into the chat, please, to Dr. Stevens?
Thank you, Dr. Priscilla. I just wanted to ask Dr. Stevens, if you're vaccinated and you've been exposed to a large group of people who were probably unvaccinated, you don't have any symptoms, how soon should you, after that time, get tested? Or should you, if you're not feeling anything?
You should still be tested like at least 1 to 2 days later. Because
Okay.
if you're not feeling anything, and the CDC does say, okay, y'all, so I'm just gonna tell you, the CDC does have that information on its website, but like how some people read the Bible and they only take the parts that they want to be relevant to them. They don't read down to the B clause. So if you're indoors, especially if you're indoors, and because right now, y'all, we're depending on like people, the honesty system, and that's what got us in this pandemic before. Because people, you thought you were in one pod, and they had like 5 pods. Remember when the whole pod thing came out? And so then everybody is like COVID positive, and you're like, "But I only have this one pod." But then you talk to that pod, it's like, "Oh, well, I got another pod with my homies over here." So we the honesty system, y'all, we're not going to be able to depend on people who are unvaccinated out in the masses to be masked up. Now, me, I wear my mask regardless because I just know better. I've been out in the trenches, and I'm not gonna lie, I did not agree with the CDC, and a lot of my colleagues in the field of epidemiology agreed as well that it was just too soon to say if you're inside that you should not, if you're vaccinated, that you don't have to wear a mask. Because again, as I just said, you can still spread the virus or even get the virus from someone, even though if you're vaccinated, of course, you won't have to go to the hospital. But if an unvaccinated person is exposed, they could possibly go to the hospital and they can end up on ventilators. And that's essentially like what's happening, especially if they're young people. I'm just gonna say, y'all still in the clubs, popping bottles, buying sections, all that stuff, y'all putting it out. Listen, if you're gonna choose to be unvaccinated, and I hope that you decide to be vaccinated, especially if you're gonna be out and about, you're gonna have to leave the hookah and all the vapes, all that stuff alone, because it weakens your immune system and it makes you more susceptible to COVID. So I'm just throwing that out there. Very bad news.
Well, I'm glad you said that because college kids, they're getting ready to go back to school. They feel like they're invincible, and they don't understand when you out socializing with other people who are not doing the things that you're doing, you bring it back to give it to someone else. My thing is, think like this. If you don't think of anything else, think of yourself in your own health. Protect yourself even when others do not protect themselves. Because if you don't, we're going to be reverting back and all of us going to be shut down in a little situation again. So my thing, we have to do this thing as a team effort to ensure we keep this pandemic in an area where it can be minimized to the fact that we can go back to some really, really normalcy. Because even some people say, oh, well, I got the antibodies in my system and I can't get COVID. Okay, what gave you that type of description saying you could? You were the medical profession. So I think people understand that too. You still, even though you have made positive antibodies, you can still get it. That's why, from my understanding.
Yes, because antibodies don't last. That's why, like, we had the measles outbreak, because I mean, you got vaccinated when you were like, what, 4, 5, 6, and then you're in college, and just think, especially for those of you who are in college and on campus, your classmates are coming from all over the world, and more than likely they are coming from some of these countries that don't have access to vaccines.
It's true.
And
it's
so
true.
they may be vaccinated when they get here, but you don't know. And that's like when the main thing that I say when I'm talking to people from wherever, and I always say, I don't know other people's habits. So I still move like it is March 2020 because I don't know people's habits, and we don't know people's habits. And just because someone pops up and they don't have a mask on at the kickback, they might just be doing that out of peer pressure. So now everybody is unmasked, but only, I think the numbers now is like 2 out of 3 young adults are vaccinated. So you just start doing your count. So it's 2 out of 3 vaccinated. But if you are in a situation in a kickback and there's people there, at least 1 out of every 5 people will have COVID or be COVID positive. Wow. So I don't like those odds.
I don't either.
It's more COVID positive people than vaccinated people.
Wow.
Dr. K.
Yes.
So I know around inauguration time, they start speaking of wearing 2 masks, doubling up your mask. So obviously right now in Georgia, you go into a store, most people aren't wearing a mask at all. Would you stand for 1 mask or 2 masks? What would be best, whether you're vaccinated or not?
I am always the 2 mask proponent. And I have to, but I also have to interject here how to wear them, because people were wearing like 2 of the disposable masks. So, and especially with this Delta variant, people are calling Delta, but in the public health community, on a global perspective, because I'm sitting in all these meetings, is Delta Plus, because it's mutated even a little more, y'all. So I'm just throwing that out there. And then there's a Lambda variant too that originated in Peru that has taken out a lot of people. And so it's been found in the US, did some testing, water sample, sewage water testing in Nevada, because everybody's in Vegas turning up, maskless, the whole deal. Lambda variant is there. It's a variant of concern as well. So do y'all Googles. It may actually be able to avoid being detected by the vaccine. So that's why you have to wear your mask. So when you're doubling up, so I wear KN95s. So you can get them on Amazon. They're going to protect you from those smaller particles. And so you only need 1 of those, which is why I wear the KN95. It's most similar to the N95, which is the medical grade. So I get mine off Amazon. There's a specific one that I get that was developing, like the concept was 2006, and it's FDA approved. So hit me up if y'all want to know which one. I'll share my link. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just telling you which one I wear. And I've been good so far. But if you can't, and I know that some people, and so that was last year, that was like my thing. I was like, we're like looking at people sideways because they don't have a mask on, but how do we know that they can afford a mask? I know during the demonstrations and protests last summer for Black Lives Matter, I was downtown passing out masks to homeless people because guess what? Yeah, we encroached on their territory. That's their hangout, and so just needed to make sure that they had a layer of protection. So if you're not going to do a KN95, if you have like the washable, rewearable cloth mask, and you have like the disposable like paper mask first, and then the cloth one. Never wear two disposable ones because that impacts your breathing. So if you're gonna double up, it needs to be the disposable one and then the cloth one. And so
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. K. And then we have a question. Dwayne, would you mind releasing your video and releasing your mic and ask the question, please?
Good morning. I was just wondering about the rumors that are going around about getting younger children vaccinated and the vaccine causing infertility. I have 2 teenagers that are going to go back into school. One is 13, one is 15. And I'm just not real sure about getting them vaccinated because of this infertility stuff. And I definitely don't want to do anything that's going to cause them to not have that choice of having children in the future. So is that true? Is that just a myth? And then my second part of my question is, I have severe moderate asthma. Sometimes wearing a mask, I really get winded. Is there a certain type of mask that I can wear to help with that?
okay. So first question about the infertility in like the teens, that's not true. And I think we touched on it earlier, where there's no genetic material in the vaccine. So the mRNA vaccines are RNA, and there is a difference between RNA and DNA. So RNA does not have any genetic material. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not even an mRNA vaccine. It's an adenovirus based vaccine. They didn't use the SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19 virus. They used an inactivated form of a cold virus that's found in animals. So it does not affect the human body. And they actually just put the spike protein into that particular virus. So there's no genetic material in these vaccines. So, and also guys, if you're on the fence, because I know the mRNA vaccines are new, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is most closely related to traditional vaccines that we've received as children. I know there's all that controversy, like, oh, they stopped it. So I will tell you, when they paused the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it was because 8 Caucasian women aged 37 to, I think, 49 or 50 got blood clots. So they paused it for 8 women. And so then they unpaused it, but they didn't put it out like, with the whole vaccine and autism thing, when they didn't it's like, hey, we were wrong. We couldn't make the correlation between these blood clots and this vaccine. So it wasn't like really publicly put back out there. And so Johnson & Johnson is safe. You're one and done. I will tell you about Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Their clinical studies were done in South Africa and Brazil and other parts of South America. So their clinical trial consisted of people of color, and it's just as effective as the mRNA vaccines. So I'll just throw that out. I want to get to the other part, the mask for asthma. There's like really no good mask. I would just say try them out. If you have severe asthma, I definitely would not recommend doubling. But if you could get like the disposable, not the cloth ones where you can actually put like a filter insert into it, then that would be the one that I would recommend. Because I have asthma, but I have allergy-induced asthma, so it's not severe. But if I know that it's like hot and I'm outside, that's my go-to.
Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Dr. K. I think also, could you put into the chat that recommended, possibly the ones you suggested, N95 masks, that those can purchase on Amazon? I know there was concern, some of those has asked about that as well.
Yes, Dr. Priscilla?
Yes.
Yeah, I have two questions that I wanted Dr. Stevens to expound upon.
Yes, you can go
first of
ahead
all,
and ask those.
Going back to the Tuskegee study, for someone that has concerns about, and I know that's dealing with clinical trials, and if you would speak on the importance of African Americans being involved in clinical trials and why that should not happen today, that, you know, what happened with the Tuskegee study because of the things that have been put into place for clinical trials. That's my first, if you could expound upon that. And also just expound upon benefits versus the risk. Okay. Because a lot of people saying, well, you know, I'm afraid I'm going to be that number, that I have bad side effects. But talk about benefits versus the risk, please. Thank you.
So, okay, I'll start with benefits versus the risk. So basically what happens in a clinical trial is that they look at, based on these side effects that we've seen in the population of participants, are they severe enough to not be beneficial to those who didn't have any side effects? And so let's say there was a clinical trial for, I'm trying to think now. I'm trying to give like a good example. So, okay, like for instance, there's like this medicine now that you can put that grows your lashes. So, but the intent of that medicine was not like, hey, let's see if we can make people's lashes grow, but it was it was like for some type of eye disease. And so, but what happened, people who participated in the clinical trial was like, hey, my lashes started to grow when I was using this. So, and so it was like, okay, but guess what? The medicine really wasn't effective for what they were trying to target in the clinical trial, but it grew lashes. So, you know, it was another benefit. So those are the kind of things that they look at. When you get vaccinated, you can go to, it's a VAERS.gov, VAERS.gov, and it tells you every side effect. You can report like, I got vaccinated and I sneezed for 5 days. I got vaccinated and my eyebrows grew. So every little thing that someone may experience when they're vaccinated has to be reported, and it goes into this one website, and it's called VAERS.gov. And you can go in and you can see. And so based on that, so the participants in the trial, they reported everything that happened to them, you know. And so they looked at all of the quote unquote side effects, and then, but they looked at the remaining people again. And so the benefits of putting this vaccine on the market outweighed that small number of risk of people. And so now I know you're going to say, well, Dr. K, but every time we turn around, it seems like something else is happening with something coming out with these vaccines. So to explain that even further, so when they did these clinical trials, it was like 30 to 40,000 people. Well, that's not nearly representative of everybody that's in the US, right? So the more you vaccinate people, the more some of those little smaller side effects will come out, because you're actually vaccinating more people in the vaccination in the population. So, you know, those late night commercials, if you have, you know, taken this drug and you have this, call this number. And that's what you're going to see with everything, because we just don't know. The more the population that's vaccinated, I'm allergic to everything that grows outside, y'all. So the more, the more people that are exposed, then you're going to start seeing, those little side effects that come up, and everybody tries to make money off of it. So just to put that out there. So I'm not going to take something that says, if you take this, possible side effects, and they start rambling off all this stuff. If I hear anything related to me sneezing or having, extreme allergy conditions, I'm like, yeah, no, that's not for me. So it's just all about doing your research and just really finding your sources of truth, and just understanding now that because of the Tuskegee Experiment, and then there are some other studies that happened. It wasn't just with Black people, where the government, and it's not even the government. So let me just stop even saying the government, because doctors, hospitals, clinics are the ones that are conducting these trials. It's a lot of times it's companies, and they withhold information because they're just trying to get their products on the market. But now there are mechanisms in place. So it's something called an informed consent form. So by law now, they tell you the purpose of the study, what the outcome, how long it's going to last. So up front, you already know what you're getting yourself into. I participated in a clinical trial to get a migraine drug on the market, y'all. If I had a headache, and it didn't even have to be a migraine, they just needed data. So they paid me $500 to have a headache, y'all. How many of y'all have headaches? I mean, come on. And the only thing I had to do, and I can say, well, it was now Excedrin has Excedrin for migraines, Excedrin for tension. Y'all, it's all just extra strength Excedrin, I found out. But they market it to people who have headaches. So they were like, well, based on the information that you gave us, we wouldn't classify this as a migraine, but it is a tension headache because you might have a little stress. But here's your $500 and go and be well, take this medicine. I was like, okay, thank you. Can I sign up again? They were like, no. So but listen, I'm just saying, I've been on the other side of that where I did research. Like I said in the beginning, I worked at Emory School of Medicine, and I did research for breast and cervical cancer research. And I worked with a lot of teens in the teen clinic at Grady who had HPV, because they have that whole HPV vaccine on the market, which is a whole nother thing. I won't get into it, but yeah. So find y'all a little trial, something that's non-invasive, just to get your feet wet, so you can figure out how it works. And they actually pay you because they need information.
They need the data.
They need the data.
Mm-hmm.
$500 for me to get a regular, these folks at my job done got on my nerves headache. I'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have any additional questions, Dr. Williams?
No, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, because I had another question that was asked too, Dr. K. Would you recommend working out for those who want to get some of this pandemic weight off or get back healthy or whatever in a public gym?
Listen, okay. I wouldn't recommend the public gym because, again, it's indoors. And I don't know how often they're cleaning their filters. I'm just putting that out there. And aerobic exercise, you're forcefully pushing air out of your body. So if they told people that you can't have a choir in the church because of the forcefulness of the air that's coming from the lungs, so let's apply, the same thing applies to working out in the gym. So yeah, I went and got me a Peloton.
Well, I totally agree with that too. And then it kind of piggybacks on what you said about the filter. I think the last time you spoke with us, you were talking about the filter that you can get in your home. Could you speak upon that for those who might have some systematic types of symptoms for that, and to have that filter in their home? Can you kind of expand on that a little bit as well? The type that you feel that you can recommend?
Yeah, so how many first of all, when was the last time y'all changed y'all air filters? Because y'all know we were supposed to change them every 6 months at the house, right? So I'll just park that there. And so there are filters that you can get, and people kind of, you know, they jumped on me for this because they were like, you're endorsing. I'm not endorsing. This is a recommendation based on information that I got from an ambassador to China, because there was a hospital in China that had no deaths from COVID because they followed certain measures. And one of the things that they used was a plasma air purifier. And they put it in the homes because it actually, that particular filter that's in a plasma air purifier, can actually pull the virus, filter the virus out of the air. And people are like, the virus is so small. So y'all, somebody actually got into a debate, and I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist. So my specialty is, I've been trained in infectious diseases. You can Google me. I've published on Ebola before it was even a household name. And they used my information, my research during the Ebola outbreak. I've worked with the plague. I work with all kind of stuff y'all probably never heard of. Like even the monkeypox. Y'all know the man that came from Africa to the Atlanta airport last week with monkeypox and went to Dallas. The only thing I can say is, Lord, I hope he had on a mask while he was waiting for his flight, because it is like an airborne disease. It's always similar to smallpox, which has been eradicated. So people think that, you know, when COVID came, that it just absorbed all the other diseases. No, it's still out there. And I just also want to throw out there that STDs have increased too, and not the kind you can get rid of. So I'll just park that there too. There's an increase in STDs. So yeah, plasma air purifiers, they work. I travel if I have to go. Last resort, if I have to go to a hotel, I take one with me, because there was a study where everybody was like going to the hotels to quarantine from COVID, like when they were like positive, or just if they had a family member. And some of the hotels that weren't like really changing their filters often, people actually got sick. So you really have to think about, and you have to move different now in this pandemic. I'll say that. Like, take everything into consideration, like where you're going. They're like, well, Dr. K, just still stay in the house. Like, I'll go out, I eat on rooftops and patios outside. So do you wear a mask outside? If you are in a place like a stadium and you're not moving, so it's not like the constant movement, you need to wear a mask, because you're right there and you're breathing in other people's air. You're in other people's airspace. But if you're outside at the park and you're walking, you're doing this, that, and the third, you don't need a mask. But the virus clumps together. The argument, oh, the virus is so small, these masks don't work. Well, one particle of a virus is not infecting you anyway, y'all. I'm from the east side. I grew up off Candler Road, for indicators. So sometimes it comes out because I get passionate. So I'll just throw that out there. But the virus infects you in clusters. So when they come and they're arguing with you about masks and all that stuff, make sure that you tell these people that one particle of a virus cannot infect you. It works, it clumps together. So if you are positive and you're singing, when y'all know when you sneeze, it's not just one particle, that stuff go everywhere. So it's the same thing with the virus. It clumps together, and that's how that infection happens. So, and that's why I was like, when you're outside and you're just there, I was like, y'all out there in that COVID cloud. I was like, oh, it's not, it's an invisible cloud, y'all. But I mean, I hope I'm helping y'all to kind of understand how that works, because people don't know, and they're out here and they're telling stuff, and there's so much misinformation. And I'm trying to find this mask to send to y'all, by the way, multitasking. But yeah, so definitely keep that in mind when you're out. It's not just one particle. When they're like, oh, these masks don't work, they do work because the virus actually clumps together, and that's how you're infected. So it's like you can't just have one grit. You have to have grits together.
Correct. That is true. Thank
So,
you, Dr. K, because the information I'm hoping everybody is receiving from Dr. Stevens is, I hope you're receiving it in a place that you can take it back to your family members, your children, and if you have, so you can get a better understanding if you have not gotten the vaccine or you anticipating the vaccine. I'm hoping through this that you will get a better understanding, that you can let family members who are having some hesitancy about this vaccine. For me, I'd rather be protected than not protected. And I just be very transparent. My thing is like this: you got 3 reasons you can get the COVID vaccine, you can get the COVID, or you can pass away. And I would say I will take COVID vaccine for 100, Alex, and keep it moving, because right now this thing is real. We got to get back to some normalcy. It's going to take all of us working together to understand the importance of this vaccine, the importance why the FDA had to move quickly and swiftly to get this vaccine out. People say, well, it was not FDA approved. Anything of human consumption, the FDA has to approve it. Like Dr. Stevens said, they had to expedite this because of that pandemic. They had to move things swiftly. And even as, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a Black lady who actually came up and discovered the vaccine for, was Pfizer or Moderna?
she worked for Moderna. So
Moderna, okay.
like, she was the lead scientist, but it was a group. So I just also want to say that too. She basically got paid to be the face of Moderna's vaccine, even though it wasn't just her. Take no credit from her, but I'm just here to just put the truth out there. So Dr. Hubbard, you're right. She was one of the ones that worked on the team, but because people harped on the fact that she was a part of the team, so they made her the face of the Moderna vaccine. But she worked along with a team. And so that has been another like source of misinformation too, that the young people have actually brought up, because they were like, they're just trying to force it on Black people by saying a Black person discovered it, that kind of thing. And I was like, well, she was a part of the team. It wasn't just her.
Right.
Dr. Corbett was a part of the team that led, for the release of the Moderna vaccine. And so y'all, Moderna had been working on mRNA vaccines for 10 years, 9 or 10 years. It's not like they just popped up one day and said, okay, here it is. So they couldn't afford, so there were missing parts of it that other researchers had. So they all came together. And so Moderna was actually able to finish their vaccine and get it into a trial.
Thank you so much, Dr. K. I think, Andre, you had your hand raised. You want to ask a particular question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because we're getting, and I'm to piggyback on what Dr. Stevens was saying. I believe that may have been a marketing strategy, to take her from the group, and make it, make it more appealing for, of course, us Black and brown people.
Absolutely.
But in relation to where we are, we're getting ready for, like, the southern states are going back to go to school. The children are going to, of course, they're going to have some protective measures in place at the schools. Is it projected that we'll see another spike?
We're already in a spike, and it's mostly being seen in children, unfortunately. And so I tell people, and y'all forgive me because I'm passionate about this, and I talk about this, especially in Black communities, because I'm like, we're always the first affected, but the last to get the information, which is why I have just been on like just this I don't even know what to call it anymore, because I'm like, are y'all still listening to me out there? But okay. No, because I'm always going into communities and schools, and I actually sit on the COVID medical advisory board for the Cobb County school system. They asked me to be a part of it. And that was one of the things, the recommendation was was children en masse, since the CDC came out and said that it's more beneficial for kids to be in school. But y'all, guess what? Last year, so who were the first people to be sent home in the pandemic? Well, before y'all even knew it was a pandemic, but we knew, but they had not yet released it to the public. It was the kids. And so the kids were at home, our babies was kept inside, they were not out in the community socializing. And so guess what? They didn't build some of that natural immunity or protection that the rest of the population got for being out. You know, some kids were born into the pandemic. They had never seen it outside of a store. They kept them babies inside until 2021. So now that they're making a case for kids to return to the classroom. And so, unfortunately, what we're seeing in for hospital rates now is children. And it's because, children can't, okay, and so let me back up one more time, because what did they say? Kids can't get COVID. Y'all remember when they said that?
Mm-hmm.
That administration. So yeah, so some people still believe that. So when their kids actually have symptoms of COVID, they say, oh, it's a cold or it's the flu, and it gets worse. And a lot of it is developing into pneumonia. And so that's why the kids are having to go into the hospital. So it's not that COVID is just ravaging them and is, but they are being affected. They're just not being treated in time. And I just want to throw that out there. I did make the recommendation for the Cabot County schools for kids to wear masks. The Cabot County kids because I basically used the system against them. CDC said, if you're not vaccinated, what should you do? What do you have to do? Wear a mask inside. Mm-hmm. Who's eligible for vaccinations? 12 and over. So if you're under 12, what should you do inside?
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
That's right.
And so, and if they are not, and so the vaccinated children do have the option of not wearing a mask, but for the most part, we have to think about there are kids who are immunocompromised in schools. So do you just not give them the opportunity to go back because they're not going to enforce mask wearing? What about the teachers? So what about the asthmatic students? Because what about the students with diabetes, because they're still considered at risk? And our Black and brown children have the highest numbers of type 1 diabetes. Mm-hmm. So you have to take all of those things. You have to know the numbers. You can't just go by what you're hearing on TV. Mm-hmm. So then, I've been getting a lot of hate emails and all this stuff from people. I really don't care because I care about the children. A school bus is public transportation. What has to happen on public transportation? You're supposed to wear your mask. So vaccinated or unvaccinated, if you are on a school bus, you have to wear your mask. So you just if you know what's been out there, you have to read, you have to understand. And I encourage all of y'all to read. Y'all can reach out to me if you have questions, after this, but you have to know. And so they was like, what the governor said. I said, the governor doesn't have any jurisdiction over school districts.
Wow. That's good information to know, Dr. K, because like I said, children, they need to be protected. And I hope our young people need to understand, get vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, wear the mask, because it's utmost important to make sure you are, most of all, well informed. And if you don't know, get to the person or the people such as yourself who are on the front lines on a daily basis, can give you the right information. And I know it's getting closing up to the end of this session. This has been wonderful. Before we close out, I would like to hear from Dr. Williams for any closing remarks, and then also goes on to Elder Faulkner if you want to go closing remarks out before we end, and so we can give Dr. Stevens the opportunity to give us final remarks before we close. Dr. Williams.
Yes, excellent session. Thank you, Dr. Stevens, and thank you for relating well. My comment would just be to look at the science, yes, but look at what happened when the vaccine started being administered. What happened? The cases went down. That you have to look at. Now we have the Delta variant, and unfortunately it is affecting unvaccinated people, and unfortunately a large population of that are the young people. And that's why we cannot afford to lose young people. Anybody, yes, but we don't want to lose our young people. And that's why I thank my pastor for reaching out to Elder Faulkner and wanting to reach you, the young people. If you have questions, ask them. Being informed, knowledge is power. You have to be informed to make an intelligent, informed decision. I believe you've gotten information to do so, and just want you to use it. So, and I want to say one other thing. We have lost too many pastors. We have lost too many church folk. We have lost too many people because of this virus. So we need to do what we can do to alleviate that and stop that. So thank you for being with us today.
I want to say thank you, Dr. Stevens, and thank you, Dr. Hubbard, for having this session. One of the things that what took hold to me when I did my MDiv was all about sources and making sure I'm quoting the right sources. And I think a lot of times I speak from the position of a young person. I'm 38 years old, and so I speak from the position of young people because we like to listen to other people who take information from just random places and believe that everything they hear on the news is correct, everything they hear on Google or Wikipedia is correct, and it may not be the case. As an automotive technician, I'm not a doctor, and so I have to understand that I have expertise in a certain area. And as I believe Dr. Carmen talked about it earlier, or Dr. Hilbert, even doctors, there are cardiologists, there are, heart doctors, head doctors, feet doctors, and they specialize in a certain area. And I'm happy today that we were able to get someone who specializes in the area of medicine and the diseases. And it has been a informed session because it is helping me to be able to take back the information and to share it with my family and friends, co-workers, because this is real and we have got to take precautions. We do want to get back to the level of normalcy, but we can't keep going back in the decline. And, it seems like, we get a break and then we got to go back inside, so it's like, I'm ready to eat out in restaurants and enjoy myself in concerts and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we got to do what's right. So I thank you for sharing with us. And I definitely want to stay connected with you, Dr. Kenyetta Stevens. We're going to have some upcoming leadership events in September. And I would definitely like to have you do like a session with the young people because I believe that this is going to continue to happen, if we don't stay informed. And so I'm just also looking, we haven't started school yet. So I'm really very concerned, very, very, as a parent. I have 3 young kids who are kindergarten, pre-K, and 1 getting ready to get out going to 1st grade. So, they're under 12 years old. So I'm concerned from a standpoint as a parent. I had the coronavirus in March, and they were telling me as far as the antibodies and that I had to wait a certain period to take it. But as soon as I get back home, I'm going to take it because this is helped me. My wife is fully vaccinated, So this has helped me. My parents are fully vaccinated. My in-laws are vaccinated. So this has helped me. And I'm going to share this information with our young people from the church because we got to stop listening to people
They don't know.
that don't know.
That's right.
You go to the experts.
You know, like you said earlier, we read parts of the Bible. We don't read the whole thing, and we take one thing out of context and just go off of what other people said, and we don't actually take the time out to study and understand it for ourselves. So thank you so much for this session. This has been a good help to me.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And again, I would say on behalf of our Bishop Dallas and Bishop Guthrie and our First Lady, Lady Marshallette Guthrie, and all our ministers in the Georgia State Council, we're truly honored and truly blessed to have a Dallas Bishop and First Lady who cares not only about our spirit, but they care about our health as well, to be able to bring phenomenal people such as yourself, Dr. Stevens, to give us this information, because like I said, he wants the best, and Bishop is definitely always a minister and a pastor and a bishop who makes sure his people get the best. And you are the best in the business. You are an expert in the business, and we're truly honored to be able to have you to make sure we get the best information that we can pass on to our other members, our family members, our church members, and those who are able to be at this session today. And again, I say, Bishop wanted to make sure I informed you to say he really appreciate you, as well as Lady Marcia, for taking time out of your busy schedule on Saturday to ensure we get better informed. And if you would, Dr. Stevens, give us your final remarks before we close out for today.
Yes, thank you. And again, it's always an honor to share with you. And, you know, Bishop is my bishop, you know. And so, guys, and closing remarks, just get vaccinated, because at the end of the day, you don't know who, without that mask in the store or at that concert or wherever, is actually vaccinated. If you choose not to be vaccinated, then you need to wear a mask. You still need to social distance, and you still need to like wash your hands frequently, because that's that luxury, you know, the luxury of not wearing a mask is that, you know, they tell you not to, that you know, don't have to do these things if you're vaccinated or whatever. But still wear your mask regardless, because we don't know. Because we know there was the non-vaccinator movement, so they don't want to wear a mask. They don't want to be vaccinated. They're gonna have to choose a struggle. Because if you don't want to be vaccinated, you should definitely always wear your mask. But again, if you want that luxury of, in certain situations, of not having to wear a mask if it's a small group, then just get vaccinated. And then I get so many questions about the future and the kids. Well, guess what? If you're not vaccinated, you don't even have to worry about that, because you probably won't even be here. So I hate to be like that brutal, but you're concerned about something and you're not even taking care of yourself in the present. And you're so about the future. You have to take care of yourself in the present in order to have a future and worry about those future things. And that's like the main thing that I always just leave like with my young people. Like, we have to take care of ourselves right now. We have to be present in this moment, and we have to do what's best for ourselves. And like I always tell everybody, like when I was doing like the different segments and stuff last year, do what you need to do to live to fight another day. And as I always say, if someone is gonna has to be alive to tell the story, I prefer that it be me. So
I know that's right, Dr. K. I mean, somebody has to live to tell the story, and I want it to be me too.
Yes.
Me too.
Get vaccinated, get vaccinated for your life.
Yes.
And thank you again, Dr. Stevens, so much. Thank you again, Dr. Williams. Thank you again, Elder Faulkner, and for everyone being on with us today. And we pray that this information was very helpful to you, and that hopefully you leave with better knowledge, better understanding about everything that you may have some questions or concerns. And we just thank you again. We pray that you have a wonderful day, prosperous, and most of all, stay healthy. And we love you.
Bye.
Bye.